Join me as I challenge myself to survive a whole night in the scariest forest out there. There's a place where the bravest of souls dare not tread, where the trees seem to whisper eerie tales and the wind howls like a chorus of restless spirits. It's a forest with a notorious reputation, one that has been shrouded in mystery and terror for centuries. People whisper stories of supernatural encounters, of unexplained sightings, and of those who ventured in never to return. I'm about to spend a night in its heart. Spending a night in this forest is no trivial pursuit. You're not just battling the elements, you're also facing off against the unknown. Wildlife roams free, and the darkness can play tricks on your mind. It's easy to get lost, and once you're deep in, it's hard to find your way back. The forest has a way of disorienting you, making you question what's real and what's just your imagination. And then, of course, there are the tales of ghostly apparitions, of whispers in the dark, and of unexplained occurrences that'll make your skin crawl. You see, this forest has a way of getting under your skin. It's not just the eerie atmosphere or the spine-tingling stories. It's the sense of vulnerability that comes with being deep in the wilderness, surrounded by an unsettling silence. You're at the mercy of nature, and that's a humbling experience. One wrong move, and you could be facing a night of terror. Survival in this forest requires a mix of skill, strategy, and sheer luck. You need to know how to navigate through the treacherous terrain, how to find shelter, and how to start a fire. You need to be prepared for the unexpected, to stay calm in the face of fear, and to push through the exhaustion. It's not a challenge for the faint of heart, but for those who dare to venture into the unknown. The forest has a rich history full of tales that'll send shivers down your spine. There's stories of ancient rituals, of mysterious cults, and of unexplained phenomena that have been documented for centuries. People have ventured in, seeking thrills and chills, and some have never returned. Those who have made it out alive speak of an experience that's hard to put into words. If an encounter with something that defies explanation, you hear tales of strange noises, of disembodied voices, of apparitions that seem to follow you through the trees. You hear stories of people who have gone in searching for answers and have come out with more questions. The forest has a way of toying with your mind, making you question what's real and what's just your imagination. I've spoken to people who have ventured in, who have shared their spine-tingling stories, and who have given me valuable survival tips. They tell me to stay alert, to stay quiet, and to stay hidden. They tell me to avoid the ancient ritual sites, to steer clear of the mysterious symbols etched into the trees, and to never, ever venture in alone. But despite the warnings, despite the terror that grips my heart, I'm drawn to this forest. I'm drawn to the unknown, to the unexplained, and to the thrill of the adventure. I want to experience it for myself, to push through the fear, and to emerge victorious on the other side. As I sit here, deep in the heart of the forest, I'm surrounded by an unsettling silence. The trees loom above me, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. I'm trying to stay calm, to stay focused, and to stay alive. But my heart is racing, my senses are on high alert, and I'm waiting for something to happen. Anything can happen in this forest, and that's what makes it so thrilling. So, would you dare to spend a night in this forest? Would you brave the unknown, the supernatural, and the unexplained? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more adventure videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Part 1, The Descent. The whispers started the moment I stepped into the forest. At first, I thought it was just the wind, a common enough sound when you're deep in the woods. But no, it was different. Too low, too soft, and filled with words I couldn't quite understand. Yet, they wormed their way into my ears like secrets meant for someone else but overheard by accident. I should have turned back then. This place had a reputation, after all. Stories about missing people, eerie sightings, and ancient rituals passed down through generations. But I didn't care. I was drawn to it, like a moth to the flame, unable to resist the call of something dark and unknown. People warned me, hell, they practically begged me not to go. But that only made me more curious. I wasn't scared of some ghost stories. At least, not until tonight. It was still light out when I entered the forest, the pale rays of the setting sun filtering through the gnarled trees, painting everything in a haunting orange glow. The path beneath my boots felt solid, yet every step seemed to sink deeper into something unseen, like the ground was waiting for me to lose my footing. The trees swayed overhead, their branches creaking like old bones, casting long, crooked shadows across the trail. There were no birds, no insects, just an oppressive silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for nightfall. I wasn't alone. Not really. I could feel it. Something out there, beyond the trees, just at the edge of my vision. A figure, maybe? Or was it just the shadows playing tricks on me? I couldn't tell, but the sensation of being watched grew stronger with every step. I told myself it was just my mind, the stories getting to me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. And it wasn't just my imagination. There were symbols carved into some of the trees, old, jagged things, half eroded by time but still clear enough to make out. They weren't any language I knew, but they held a certain menace. Like they were warnings, messages left by those who came before me and never left. Maybe they were the final desperate acts of people trying to leave behind a mark, a reminder that they once existed. I kept walking. The sun dipped lower, the sky turning a deep shade of violet. Soon, the light would be gone, and I'd be left with only my flashlight. But I wasn't going to turn it on yet. I wanted to save the batteries. I didn't think it was wise to rely on a beam of artificial light in a place like this for too long. Besides, my eyes had already adjusted to the growing darkness, and I had the trail memorized. It wasn't the path that worried me. It was the feeling. The air thickened, becoming hard to breathe. A heavy dampness clung to the inside of my lungs. I slowed my pace, trying to steady my breathing, but it didn't help. Every gust of wind seemed to carry a weight behind it, as if the trees themselves were exhaling, breathing life into something older, something hidden beneath the earth. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Faint, like they were coming from behind, just far enough that I couldn't turn and catch them in time. I stopped dead, listening, but the second I did, they stopped too. I wasn't alone. I knew it now. The forest had been waiting, and now it had me. I quickened my pace. Not too fast, though. Running wasn't an option, not yet. I needed to stay calm, to keep control. But the footsteps kept pace with me, mimicking my every move. Faster. Slower. Pausing when I paused. They were getting closer. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest, eyes wide as I scanned the darkening forest. The trees stood silent, tall, and unmoving, their shadows stretching across the forest floor like the skeletal fingers of some unseen creature. But there was nothing. No one. Just the stillness. I turned back, trying to focus, trying to shake off the rising panic that was gnawing at the back of my mind. But that's when I saw it, something out of place. Just ahead, a clearing, bathed in the last light of the setting sun. And in the middle of it, a figure stood, facing me. It was a man. Or at least, it looked like a man. His face was hidden beneath a hood, his posture unnaturally rigid. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, waiting. I froze, my legs suddenly leaden, refusing to move. The man's presence was like a wall, a palpable force that stopped me in my tracks. There was something wrong with him. Something unnatural. I took a step back, the instinct to flee overwhelming, but I couldn't look away. His head jerked to the side in one sharp motion, and I saw his face. My blood turned to ice. The eyes. Hollow, black pits, empty and endless. His mouth hung open in a twisted, silent scream, as if he'd been frozen in the middle of some unspeakable agony. And then, he moved. No, it moved. Its body bent backward at an unnatural angle, limbs contorting like a puppet on broken strings. The figure jerked toward me, twitching and spasming with each step, closing the distance between us faster than I could react. I ran. The trees blurred past me, the world narrowing to the pounding of my feet against the earth and the deafening sound of my heartbeat. The footsteps behind me were relentless, faster now, gaining on me with every breath. The forest was no longer just a place. It was alive, and it wanted me. Ahead, I saw a flicker of light, my camp, the fire I had prepared for the night. I pushed harder, lungs burning, legs aching, but I didn't dare stop. I could feel the figure closing in, hear its distorted breathing, the crunch of its twisted feet dragging across the ground behind me. I burst into the clearing, collapsing beside the fire, gasping for air. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the trees. I didn't dare look up. It was still there, watching. Waiting. And night had just begun. Part 2, The Whispering Shadows. The fire crackled weakly beside me, offering little more than the illusion of safety. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I felt a sharp pain in my side, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins numbed everything else. For a moment, I thought I had lost it, that thing, the twisted figure that chased me. But I could still feel its presence, lurking just beyond the fire's light, hidden in the shadows of the trees. I didn't look up. Not yet. I couldn't face it again. The whispers returned. They were faint at first, blending with the crackle of the fire and the rustling leaves, but then they grew louder, clearer, as if coming from all directions at once. They spoke in tongues I didn't understand, guttural, ancient, filled with a deep, resonating malice. It felt like the forest itself was speaking to me, mocking my fear, reveling in my helplessness. Go back, I muttered to myself, trying to force my thoughts through the fog of panic. I have to go back. But back where? The trail was gone, swallowed by the creeping darkness. Every direction looked the same now, and my compass. I reached for it, only to find my pocket empty. Somehow, in my frantic escape, it had vanished. My heart sank. I couldn't stay here. Not all night. The fire wouldn't last that long, and whatever was out there wouldn't let me survive until dawn. I needed to move, to do something. Anything. A snap of a twig echoed from the trees. I froze, muscles tensed, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But where? I was cornered, trapped in this cursed place with no sense of direction and no hope of escape. My eyes flicked toward the edge of the clearing, where the twisted figure had stopped chasing me. It was still there, wasn't it? Watching. Waiting. Another snap, this time closer. I couldn't take it anymore. My gaze lifted, and there it was. It hadn't moved. It stood at the tree line, just out of reach of the fire's glow, but I could make out the silhouette. The way its body seemed to sag, barely supported by its spindly limbs. Its head hung at a strange angle, and those hollow, black eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I knew what it wanted. It wanted me to come closer. No, I whispered, shaking my head. You're not real. It tilted its head, slowly, as if it had heard me. Suddenly, the fire guttered, and the shadows around the clearing lengthened, crawling toward me. I felt a cold wind on the back of my neck, icy fingers of air brushing against my skin. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The whispers grew louder, sharper, like the crack of thunder. And then, I saw them. Not just one twisted figure, but several. They emerged from the darkness, shadows with form, stepping between the trees, circling the clearing. Their eyes were like black holes, their faces gaunt, distorted by the same unnatural agony as the first. But these were not silent. They whispered, deep, sinister voices that I could feel vibrating in my skull. They weren't just watching anymore. They were closing in. I grabbed a stick from the fire, its end still smoldering with embers, and brandished it like a weapon. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of it, but I had to do something. The figures paused, just for a moment, their dark forms wavering at the sight of the flame. Then, all at once, they started moving again. My breath caught in my throat. I swung the stick wildly, sending sparks flying through the air. It did nothing. They continued to advance, their footsteps silent, their whispers growing louder. They weren't rushing me, though. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they had all the time in the world to toy with me. And maybe they did. Stay back. I screamed, though I knew it was pointless. My voice sounded hollow, as if swallowed by the oppressive weight of the forest. The first figure reached the edge of the firelight. I could see its face clearly now, the pale, drawn skin stretched tight over a skull-like head. It had no lips, just a jagged line where its mouth should be, frozen in a grotesque, eternal grin. Its eyes, black as night, reflected nothing, no light, no life. It reached for me, long fingers curling like claws, its bones cracking with every movement. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The whispering voices grew deafening, a chorus of malevolent sounds filling my ears until I thought my head would explode. But amidst the cacophony, there was something else. A single word, repeated over and over again in a voice that was different from the rest. It was familiar. Like it was calling to me. My name. It was calling my name. How did it know my name? Who are you? I screamed, stumbling back, nearly falling into the fire. The figures stopped. The one in front lowered its hand, its head tilting as if in curiosity. The whispering subsided, replaced by a low, rhythmic humming. It was the same tone, over and over again, deep and vibrating through the ground beneath me. My mind raced, grasping for any explanation, but none came. Nothing about this was natural. Nothing about this was real. Except it was real. I was here. And so were they. The figure in front of me took another step forward, its mouth widening in that impossible grin. Then, slowly, it raised its hand again, pointing behind me. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't. But my body betrayed me, and my head turned. There was someone standing in the clearing. A woman. She was dressed in tattered white clothes, her hair matted and hanging in dirty clumps around her face. Her skin was deathly pale, her eyes wide and hollow, like those of the creatures in the woods. But she wasn't like them. No, she was something worse. Much worse. Because I recognized her. I had seen her picture. In the reports of those who had disappeared in this forest. My blood ran cold as I remembered the stories, the rumors about the people who had come here and never returned. They said some were found, their bodies mangled and torn, but others were never found at all. It was as if they had been swallowed by the forest itself. And now, one of them stood before me. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes were fixed on mine, pleading, desperate. She raised a trembling hand, pointing to the twisted figure behind me. I realized then, with horrifying clarity, that she was trying to warn me. But it was too late. The ground beneath my feet gave way, and I fell into darkness. Part 3, Into the Abyss. I didn't hit the ground. At least, not right away. For what felt like an eternity, I plunged into the darkness, weightless and suspended in a void that seemed to stretch forever. The sensation of falling twisted my stomach, and the air around me grew cold, so cold I could feel the frost creeping into my bones. My scream died in my throat, swallowed by the oppressive silence that pressed in from all sides. Then, without warning, I slammed into the ground. Hard. Pain shot through my body like a lightning bolt, and I gasped, clutching at my ribs. The air was knocked clean out of me, and for a moment, I could do nothing but lie there, dazed and disoriented. My limbs felt heavy, almost paralyzed, as if the fall had taken more than just my breath. The darkness around me pulsed, shifting like a living thing, but I couldn't make sense of where I was. What had happened? I forced myself to sit up, wincing at the sharp ache in my side. My hands grazed the earth beneath me. It was cold, damp, and soft, like I had landed in some kind of muddy pit. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a sickly sweet odor that clung to my skin and clothes. But it wasn't just the smell. It was the silence, too. The same, crushing silence that had filled the forest above. Only here, it was worse. Down here, it felt like the silence had substance, like it was alive. I was underground. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer, and my heart raced. I scrambled to my feet, the dizziness threatening to overtake me. How deep had I fallen? Where the hell was I? I fumbled in my pocket for the flashlight, half expecting it to be gone like my compass. But my fingers found it, cold and slick with mud, and I flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls of packed earth around me. The tunnel was narrow, almost claustrophobic, the ceiling low enough that I had to stoop slightly to move. I wasn't alone down here. I could feel it. A chill ran up my spine, and I turned the flashlight in every direction, desperately scanning for any sign of movement. The walls shifted in the flickering light, casting grotesque, shifting shadows that danced and twisted in unnatural shapes. But there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the endless tunnel stretching out before me. But that sensation of being watched, it gnawed at me, an itch I couldn't scratch. Something was down here with me. And it was close. I started to walk, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the confined space. Each step felt wrong, like the earth itself was moving beneath my feet, shifting and sliding as if the tunnel didn't want me there. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and the darkness seemed to press closer with every step. My flashlight flickered. "Don't go further," a voice whispered in the back of my mind, a desperate plea for reason. "Turn back." But I didn't know where back was anymore. The fall had disoriented me, and even if I could turn around, I had no idea how far I had fallen or where the surface even was. This tunnel was my only option, my only chance of finding a way out. As I moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the smell of decay intensified, becoming almost unbearable. My throat tightened, and I had to fight the urge to gag. The walls of the tunnel seemed to close in, narrowing with every step, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow me whole. My flashlight flickered again. That's when I saw the markings. At first, they were faint, barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, etched into the walls, just like the symbols I had seen carved into the trees. But down here, they were different. Darker. Deeper. These weren't old and weathered, they were fresh, like someone had carved them recently. The lines were sharp and jagged, the symbols unfamiliar, twisted in ways that made my head spin just looking at them. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew they weren't good. They felt wrong. Unnatural. My heartbeat quickened, and I moved faster, my footsteps echoing louder in the suffocating tunnel. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, to escape whatever was lurking down here, waiting for me. But the further I went, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a tunnel. This was something else. Something ancient. Something alive. Then I heard it. A sound, faint at first, like the distant wail of wind through the trees. But it wasn't wind. It was a moan, low and guttural, rising from deep within the earth. The sound grew louder, reverberating through the tunnel, shaking the walls. The ground beneath my feet trembled, and the flashlight flickered again, casting wild, erratic shadows across the walls. I stopped, frozen in place. The moaning didn't stop. It was getting closer. My flashlight sputtered, the light dimming as the sound intensified. The moan became a scream, a horrible, soul-wrenching wail that pierced the darkness, filled with such anguish and rage that I wanted to clap my hands over my ears. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, the flashlight flickering violently in my hand. The tunnel behind me was still empty, but the darkness was thicker now, almost tangible. It pressed toward me like a living thing, and within it, I could see movement. A shadow, darker than the rest, shifting and twisting at the edge of the light. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could understand. My legs refused to move at first, paralyzed by the sight of the thing slithering toward me. Its shape was all wrong, like a body distorted beyond recognition, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its face a twisted mass of shadows. But I could feel its eyes on me, cold and hungry, and I knew that if it reached me, I would never leave this place. I ran. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the walls narrowing with every step, but I didn't care. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of the thing's pursuit filled the air behind me, its twisted limbs scraping against the walls, its breath a harsh, rasping wheeze. The moaning scream echoed in my skull, vibrating through my bones, threatening to shatter me from the inside. My flashlight flickered once more, then died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. No, no, no! I screamed, stumbling forward blindly, my hands groping for the walls. But the tunnel seemed to shift and twist around me, like the very earth was changing, reshaping itself to keep me lost. I tripped, falling to the ground with a sickening thud. My knees slammed into the cold, wet earth, and I tasted blood as I bit my tongue. The creature behind me was closer now, so close I could hear the wet sound of its limbs dragging across the floor. I scrambled forward, hands clawing at the dirt, desperate to get away, but I knew it was too late. I could feel it, the cold presence looming over me, its breath hot and rancid on the back of my neck. Then, through the blackness, I saw it, a faint glimmer of light, far ahead, at the end of the tunnel. My last chance. I pushed myself up, blood pounding in my ears, and ran toward it, ignoring the searing pain in my legs and the cold dread clawing at my back. The creature's breath was right behind me now, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The light grew brighter, and I could see it clearly now, a small opening in the earth, just big enough for me to squeeze through. Freedom. Salvation. With a final, desperate burst of strength, I dove toward the light, my hands reaching for the edge of the opening. The cold hands of the creature brushed against my ankle, and I screamed. Part 4, The Grasp of Shadows. The moment I felt its touch, cold and slimy, like something dead dragged from a bottomless grave, a shock of terror ripped through me. Its fingers curled around my ankle, pulling me back, its strength far beyond anything I could have imagined. My scream echoed through the tunnel, but I knew no one could hear me. I was alone, trapped underground with something ancient, something evil. Panic surged through me. My hands clawed at the earth, grasping desperately for the edges of the opening, but the dirt crumbled under my fingers. The light at the end of the tunnel flickered, teasing me with its warmth and promise of escape, but it felt further away now. Too far. The creature yanked harder, and I was dragged backward, my body skidding through the cold mud. I kicked, thrashed, and screamed, but it didn't loosen its grip. The thing's breath was on me again, hot and rancid, like decayed flesh left to rot in a shallow grave. I could hear it breathing, deep, guttural, wet sounds, like it was savoring the fear that radiated off me. And then, the whispers returned. Not just in my ears, but in my mind, thousands of voices all at once, their words overlapping, filling my head with a deafening chorus of madness. They whispered of darkness, of death, of horrors beyond imagining. They spoke of endless hunger, of suffering, of a fate worse than death. It was a language I couldn't understand, yet it burrowed into my brain like a parasite, gnawing at my sanity. My vision blurred, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I saw them, all of them. The twisted figures, the ones who had chased me through the forest, the ones who had whispered in the shadows. But they weren't just creatures. They had been human once. Their faces contorted in agony, their bodies warped and broken, forced into grotesque shapes by whatever darkness ruled this place. They had all been trapped, just like me. And now they were part of it. I could see their eyes, hollow and black, filled with a sorrow so deep it felt like drowning. They reached for me, their skeletal fingers brushing against my skin, and I could feel their desperation, their need to pull me down into the abyss with them. "Join us," they whispered. "Become one with the dark." "No!" I screamed, thrashing against the thing's grip, my body shaking with adrenaline and terror. I wasn't going to die here. I wasn't going to become one of them. With a wild, desperate kick, I slammed my free foot into the creature's hand, feeling something give beneath the force of the blow. It hissed, an inhuman, guttural sound that vibrated through the tunnel, and for the briefest moment, its grip loosened. I didn't waste the chance. I kicked again, harder this time, and the creature let go. I scrambled forward, my hands digging into the dirt, pulling myself toward the light. The opening was just a few feet away now, but I could hear the creature behind me, snarling and scraping at the earth as it lunged after me. I reached the edge of the tunnel, the light blinding in its brilliance. I didn't care what was on the other side. I just needed to get out. With one final push, I threw myself through the opening. The light consumed me. For a moment, there was nothing, no sound, no sight, just blinding white light that enveloped me, so intense I thought it might burn me alive. I was weightless, suspended in that void, my mind barely able to comprehend what was happening. The whispers were gone. The creature was gone. It was just me and the light. And then, I hit the ground. The world rushed back in a blur of color and sound. I gasped, my lungs burning as I gulped down the cold night air. The taste of damp earth filled my mouth, and I spit out mud as I pushed myself up on shaking arms. My body ached, my muscles screaming in protest, my bones feeling like they'd been crushed, but I was alive. I was back in the forest. The fire from my camp was still burning, though it had died down to a dim, flickering glow. The shadows of the trees loomed over me, their gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal hands in the moonlight. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying with it the distant sound of the forest settling back into its eerie silence. For a long moment, I just lay there, panting, trying to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. My skin crawled with the lingering sensation of the creature's touch, but when I looked down at my ankle, there was no mark. No wound. Just mud and dirt smeared across my skin. Had it been real? Or was it just another hallucination, another trick of the forest? But the fear was real. The terror still gripped my chest like a vice, and I knew, whatever had happened down there, whatever that thing was, it wasn't over. Not yet. I pushed myself to my feet, every muscle in my body protesting. My flashlight was gone, lost in the depths of the tunnel, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. I had to get out of this cursed forest. The fire crackled weakly, casting long, flickering shadows across the ground, but something was wrong. The air felt different, thicker, heavier, as if the forest itself had become aware of me. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches creaking like old bones. The shadows stretched further than they should have, darker and more menacing than before. And then, I heard it again. The footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the trees. They weren't coming from one direction this time. They were all around me, surrounding the clearing, getting closer with each passing second. My breath caught in my throat, and I spun in place, searching the darkness for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. Just the shadows. But I could hear them. I could feel them. The twisted figures. The ones that had been chasing me. They were here. I backed toward the fire, my only source of light, though I knew it wouldn't protect me. Not from them. The footsteps grew louder, and I could see the shadows shifting at the edge of the clearing, dark shapes moving in the trees, circling me like predators. I was trapped. I grabbed a piece of burning wood from the fire, holding it out like a weapon, though I knew it was useless. My hands shook, the weight of the night pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. There was no escape. The light from the fire barely reached the tree line now, swallowed by the growing darkness. And then, they stepped into the clearing. The twisted figures, their bodies bent and broken, their eyes hollow and black, just like before. But there were more of them now. Dozens. Hundreds. Their faces were twisted in silent agony, their limbs contorted into unnatural shapes as they shuffled toward me. The whispers returned, louder this time. Angry. Demanding. I swung the burning stick wildly, but they didn't stop. They just kept coming, their movements slow, deliberate, as if they knew I had nowhere to go. I was surrounded. This was it. The light from the fire flickered one last time, and then it died, plunging me into absolute darkness. And in the darkness, they closed in. Part 5, Embrace of the Dark. The fire's final ember died with a soft hiss, and the darkness swallowed me whole. The twisted figures moved closer, their hollow eyes gleaming faintly, like black pearls reflecting nothing but void. My burning stick flickered out, leaving me defenseless. The cold seeped into my bones as the forest seemed to tighten around me, its ancient, malevolent presence more tangible than ever. The air was thick with the whispers, no longer distant but close, as if they were crawling inside my head, weaving themselves into the very fabric of my thoughts. I couldn't understand the words, but the intent was clear: submit. The twisted figures encircled me now, close enough that I could see the pale stretch of their skin, the way their bones jutted unnaturally beneath the surface, twisted and grotesque. Their faces were empty, yet their agony was palpable, an eternal suffering etched into every part of them. They had been like me once. Human. Alive. Now, they belonged to the forest. No, I gasped, my voice barely audible, my breath ragged with fear. No. But the forest didn't care about my fear. It thrived on it. I took a step back, the earth soft and yielding beneath my feet, like I was sinking. My back hit something solid, a tree, or at least that's what I thought. But when I turned to look, it wasn't a tree at all. It was another figure. One of them. Its skin pale and clammy, its body gnarled and twisted, standing unnaturally still, as though waiting for my touch. I jumped back, heart slamming in my chest, but the figures only moved closer, their whispers now a chorus of voices, so loud that I thought my skull would split open. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out, but the whispers weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside. Echoing in my head. Twisting my thoughts. Warping my fear. Join us, the voices hissed, overlapping in a grotesque harmony. Become one with the dark. I stumbled forward, away from the figures, away from the oppressive weight of their whispers, but they followed, moving in that slow, deliberate way. They didn't need to rush. They knew I had nowhere to go. The ground beneath me shifted again, softening, almost as if it was trying to swallow me whole. The dirt clung to my boots, thick and heavy, dragging me down with every step. I was sinking, bit by bit. Panic surged again. I needed to get away. I needed to escape. But where? Where could I go? The forest stretched out endlessly, an eternal prison of shadows and twisted figures. There was no escape. Not from them. I could feel my mind unraveling, the whispers tearing at my sanity, pulling me deeper into the abyss. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I saw something else, something worse than the twisted figures. I saw the forest for what it truly was. It wasn't just trees and shadows. It was alive, a living entity that fed on the souls of those who wandered too far into its depths. The twisted figures, the whispers, the terror, it was all part of it. All part of the same malevolent force that had existed here for centuries, drawing in the curious, the brave, the foolish. And once it had you, it never let go. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't fighting just to survive the night. I was fighting to keep my soul from being devoured by the forest itself. But the more I fought, the more it tightened its grip on me. The whispers changed then. No longer just meaningless sounds, they were voices now. Familiar voices. My mother's voice. My father's. Friends. People I knew. People who had been part of my life. It's okay, they whispered. Asterisk, just give in. You're tired. So tired, asterisk. I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the illusions, but the voices persisted, gentle now, coaxing, urging me to surrender. Asterisk, you've been running for so long. Just let go. It's easier. Asterisk. I dropped to my knees, my body trembling uncontrollably. They were right. I was tired. So tired. My muscles ached, my mind was on the verge of collapse, and every breath felt like it was taking more from me than it gave. The twisted figures had stopped moving. They were standing now, perfectly still, their hollow eyes fixed on me. Waiting. I pressed my hands into the dirt, feeling it slide between my fingers, cold and wet. My vision swam again, and I saw their faces, no longer grotesque and twisted, but human. Familiar. They were people I knew. People who had disappeared into this forest, their souls claimed by its darkness. And now they were part of it. I saw their pain, their suffering, their endless torment, but beneath it all, there was something else. Peace. If I gave in, the suffering would stop. The terror, the exhaustion, the fear, it would all end. I would become one with them, one with the forest. No more running. No more fear. Just quiet. So quiet. The weight of the whispers pressed down on me, suffocating, but there was a strange comfort in it now. The fear was slipping away, replaced by a numbness that spread through my limbs, dulling the pain, dulling the panic. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I felt my body relax, my grip on the earth loosening, and for the first time, I stopped fighting. The whispers were soothing now, like a lullaby. The figures moved closer again, but they didn't seem threatening anymore. They seemed welcoming. I could feel the darkness creeping in, soft and inviting, wrapping around me like a blanket. Just let go. But something stopped me. A flicker. A memory. A moment of clarity, cutting through the fog of whispers like a blade. I remembered the light. The small flicker of light I had seen in the tunnel. The thing I had fought so hard to reach. That tiny, fragile flame that had pulled me out of the abyss. It was still there. Inside me. Small, but burning. I gritted my teeth, clenching my fists in the cold, damp earth. No. The whispers hissed, angry now, their soothing tone replaced by a sharp, venomous edge. The figures lurched forward again, their faces contorting back into their grotesque, twisted forms, their hands reaching for me. But I wasn't going to let them take me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed myself to my feet, the weight of the forest pressing down on me like a physical force. My muscles screamed in protest, my body trembling with exhaustion, but I forced myself to move. One step. Then another. The figures reached for me, their fingers grazing my skin, but I pushed past them. The whispers howled in my mind, but I shut them out, focusing on the flicker of light inside me. I wasn't going to die here. I wasn't going to become part of this cursed place. I kept walking, forcing my way through the darkness, through the twisted figures, through the suffocating weight of the forest itself. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. The whispers faded. The figures grew distant. And then, suddenly, I was free. I stumbled out of the trees, into the cold night air, collapsing onto the forest floor. The sky above me was clear, the stars shining down like distant beacons. The oppressive weight of the forest was gone, replaced by a vast emptiness. I lay there for a long time, gasping for breath, my body trembling, my mind barely able to process what had just happened. I had survived. But as I lay there, staring up at the stars, I knew one thing for certain. The forest wasn't done with me. It never let anyone go completely.